Hello guys, nice to see you. I'm going to ask you a couple questions in the middle of it, so you have to answer. So I'm not going to look bad if you don't. Okay? Alright, so today what I'm going to talk about is, as I said, a part of it is actually being colorblind, but it all sums up to being ourselves. Right? We all want to be ourselves in our lifetime. Right? But then whenever we hear this phrase, we heard it so many times, we have actually grown callous to this phrase. And we no more think too much deeply about this phrase. Alright, so I'll start off with a little question. You guys all have to answer here. I'm going to ask you in Korean to answer it in Korean. Please. So, 이게 무슨 부위죠? 이게 무슨 부위죠? That's right. Alright, so I'll start off with a little story of mine. One day I was reading this article. It was about how to predict a social trend. That's where the money lies for businesses, right? You have to be able to read the social trend. So I was reading, as I was reading onto it, strangely, other than the article itself, strangely, these two words caught my eye. Two words that everybody knows about, but in somewhat odd fashion, in somewhat odd arrangement. And these two words were habitual colorblinds. Let's keep that introduced. Right? So I know you guys are going like, how can one be habitually colorblind, right? If you can't see a color, you're just colorblind. How can you be habitually colorblind? Right? So what it actually means is that when I ask you the question, what color was that the signal was, some of you guys answered with the green light, but some answered with the blue light, 파란불, right? But people who actually answered with the 초록불, they all know, you guys all know that there are people around you, there are massive numbers of people around you who still answer with the blue light, 파란불, right? So why do we call that a 파란불? Were we actually taught to read it? Did our elementary school teachers, our parents tell us that it's not a green light, it's a blue light, you should call it a blue light? Did they ever get an education like that? I know. Well, we started calling it a blue light. Why? Because everybody else around here, around us, were calling it a blue light. Strange, right? So we're somewhat shaken. Despite what we actually conceived from this light, we were shaken by other people's thoughts, right? So I know you guys are going like, what does reading a signal right have to do with being happy or being yourself? But that's not the point I'm trying to make here. What if, I'll put this in a matter that actually matters. So what if we are actually colorblind to signals that our heart is telling us? That is telling us where we want to go and what we want to be. So, alright, so let's look back. Ever since we were born, we've been following this thing called guide, right? We weren't all independent ever since we were born. Someone has to feed us, someone has to tell us that we want to do what we had to do, what we should do, right? So we did that because we couldn't feed ourselves or anything. So we went on to our college life. But why did I go to college? The point I'm trying to make is that you guys went to college for bad reasons, but let's look back at what drove us to college. Okay? What were we driven by? Were we driven by this inner desire that we want to become something and someday in our future, and we had to go through this education? Or was it mostly because we're fearful that we might be different from others, and we might be seen as a failure? Or weren't we fearful that we might not be able to hang out with the friends that we used to hang out? And weren't we fearful that our parents would look at us in contempt? Weren't that what we were driven by, mostly? So let's look back. And let's think about it. What were we driven by? Outer reasons or inner reasons? Okay, so we got into college. And because the college was the ultimate way to achieve the ticket to employment, the diploma, right? So we got into college, we studied our asses off. There's a saying that goes like, Korean people make all the people in the world look lazy because they study so hard and they work so hard, right? And we work like that. We study like that in the college life, right? Maybe more like that in high school life, but in college life, we were still studying. And first and second, let's be honest, first and second, third year, while we were studying, were we really thinking about getting hired in some company? Or were we just studying because everybody else was doing it? And were we just studying because we were afraid of failure, getting Fs? And weren't we just studying because we don't want to take extra makeup classes during our precious summer vacation? Right? So we studied like that. And we, luckily, we got our employment ticket, finally. And we got our diploma. And we all, everybody here, I think, have a job, right? They're doing something for their living here, right? So when we got our job, we were happy, right? We were very happy. But let's look a little more deeply onto that. Why were we happy? Wasn't it because we were finally free from the fear of being unemployed, or not being able to make our own money? Weren't we finally free from not being able to answer when somebody asks you, what do you do for a living? Right? So we got our job, but only a couple of weeks later, we were resentful of this job. Why? Because it was so tough. And there's no signal. Our heart wasn't telling us that I love this job. Right? So after a couple of weeks, every morning we wake up, we were dragging ourselves out the door. We weren't actively going out there, right? We were just all passively, just because we had to, right? So let's lighten up a little mood here, and I'll share a little story of mine here. On Sunday night, I go to bed relatively late, an hour or two later than usual, right? And then I read these articles on the smartphone, right? And then the best thing about reading an article on a smartphone is that they have a pet period, something called as a pet period. You all know pet period. It's the most liked comment, and whenever it was written, the papers get popped up to the top, so everybody can read it, and it goes overnight, right? So I just read that. Sometimes it's even more fun than reading the article itself. So we just scroll down to just see the paper. We don't even finish the article. We just scroll down to see the paper, right? And then, as much as it's written by so many different people, they never actually overlap. Same paper doesn't really recur. But then there's these two papers that recurs every Sunday night and evening of a Friday. And the one that recurs every Sunday night goes like, 내일 또 읽어야 된다. Right? And every evening of a Friday, it goes, 여러분 조금만 힘냅시다. Right? And it gets so many likes, but so few dislikes, because everybody feels what he actually wrote there. Everybody feels it. Right? And there's this funny comment that I read on the one Monday morning. I was going to work. I was reading through this again. I didn't even read the article. I just read the paper and it was like, 이 또한 지나가리라. This shall pass too, right? All right. So that's all the funny aside. Let's just look back and get a little more fundamental here. 5 days. We were waiting for our 5 days of 7 weeks of our time to pass by in a blink of an eye. Is it popped here up before? That's 5 out of 7 days of our lives. That's 74%. We wanted 70%, roughly 70% of our life to be time to pass by in a blink of an eye. We just wanted it wouldn't exist. But sometime in the day, we wanted to hang out with our friends, right? So let's get a little micro here. And then if you take out 7 hours of sleeping time, average here works about 10 hours of a day, right? So let's take out 7 hours of sleeping time, and let's take out the 10 hours of your working hours in a day, and that leaves us with roughly 60%, almost 60%. So every day we're actually resenting, or we're just having this. We were not happy with 60% of our day. But we actually is this the ultimate way of life? Is this the only way we could lead our lives? Why can't we be happy for a majority of the day? If not 100%, why can't we be happy for at least half of our day? Right? So I'll share a story of this man that you guys might know about. And this guy was in a situation, or even worse in a situation than we were, because we are all in, we are living our standard life right now. But this guy lost his father when he was 6 years old. Right? And he's left as man of the house when he's 7 years old. Right? has 2 younger siblings, so he has to cook. While his mom's doing all the other, he decides to cook. And he masters dishes when he's 7 years old. But displeasingly, when he becomes a 9, his mother gets remarried, and he can't take them back. He runs out of his town, right? He runs out of town. He starts working as a farmhand. He starts a farmhand, and he works at all these different jobs. Why? Was it because he was following his passions? No. It's because he couldn't feed himself. He was doing this in order to feed himself and not let himself starve to death. So at the age of 40, he finally gathers some money. He opens a restaurant and he cooks for travelers. Okay, that's not a big business, but he feels good doing this. Well, only 20 years later, the government decides to build a highway over his only restaurant that he has, and the government leaves him with only $105 in his pocket. Right? That's a tough life. But then it's only in the middle 1900s. So the expected lifespan there was about 60 and 70 years old, right? So he's seen as like an old man, but nobody expected him to run a business here, right? But not wanting to accept his fate, he decides to franchise the chicken, right? Who's going to trust a 60-year-old man coming with a chicken recipe for chicken? He starts trying like all the different restaurants and cooks in front of 1,009 people and gets 1,009 no's, right? He's at the age of 65. He gets finally, through 1,009 trials, he reaches one guest. He gets the opportunity to found his franchise, right? So this man, at the age of 65, he finally opens his store. And you know who this is? It might ring a bell here. You might be a little familiar with this guy. Right? And still, for those who's not ringing a bell, this guy, when everybody believed that it was a time for his deathbed, opened and made his dream come true. Why? Because he was following something. Right? So, we are actually living our life and apply what David Thoreau says, apply lives of quiet desperation. We're resenting most of our lives. I'm not saying we all don't have a chance here, but why have we come to resent so much of our lives? At least half of our lives. Why have we come? Let's look back as I brought up. Are we resenting our lives because we have been living for what we're wanting for? Or are we resenting our lives because we've been living out of fear of being different? We cannot keep being habitual colorblind to signal of our own hearts. When everybody tells you that this is a blue light, you cannot accept that fate. That decides your future of life. Right? The longer you wait to begin, the less likely you're going to find the inner voice. That's what Steve Jobs says. And I want to share this little video clip.
Gradually become the old and be cleared away. Sorry to be so dramatic, but it's quite true. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary.
Right? We have been living, let's be honest, and face our past and what we have mistaken for our lives. Right? Do not be trapped by dogma. Right? We've been living by what Steve Jobs calls dogma. Let's be honest and look back. In order to make improvement, we have to face the reality we've been living by. We have to face the mistakes that we have made in the future. Right? So we were living by dogma. Let's be honest. Right? And that's led us to a safe place right now, and we should be thankful that we're in a safe place. But we cannot keep living this way. Do not let right? I don't have to read it out, and you know what it all means, right? So let's stop. When everybody tells you should do this and you should do that, I'm not telling you to ignore what other people say. But just take in that as a consideration list. Just put that in a consideration list. Don't put it in your what to do list. Okay? You put your what to do list what your heart tells you. Okay? It's going to be hard to read it. It's going to be hard to decipher what your heart says. But you have to keep trying. As Robin Williams says, the longer you wait to begin, the less likely you're going to find it at all. So, as much as our time is limited, so let's think about this. We have average life here. Our average age here is about 30 years, right? And that leaves us, we are so-called a century lifelong span generation. We're expected up to live up to 100 years of our life, right? And that leaves us with 70 years of our lives, 70 years more to go, right? And if we resent 5 days of our 7 days, then that means we're going to resent another 50 years of our leftover 70 years of our life. Do we want to live that way? Do we really want to? Do we want to keep living by what other people tells us and what the results of other life and keep living this way? Do we still want to ignore or not even care about or bend our ears to our hearts? Or do we want to start listening to our hearts and make that 50 years that we might be resenting, shrink that to maybe 0 years? We have good chances here. We have good chances. And if we all try to listen to our hearts, we're all going to make it. Right? So stop thinking what other people tell you is the proper way to live your life. Because the only proper way to live your life to happiness is by listening to your own heart. That's it.